Two people, same brain, same hunger to build wealth. One starts investing at 22 with whatever is left after rent and groceries, sometimes $150, sometimes $300. Never consistent, never impressive. The other waits, gets serious at 34, reads every book, takes the courses, opens a brokerage account with $1,200 the first month and never looks back. Disciplined, focused, motivated in a way the first person never was. 30 years later, one of them is financially free. The other is calculating whether they can afford to retire at 68. The one who won is not who you think. And the reason nobody talks about why is not complicated. It is uncomfortable, because the answer exposes something the financial industry, the self-help industry, and every Start Your Investment Journey influencer has a shared interest in keeping vague. The truth about early investing versus investing more money later is not a debate about strategy. It is a debate about how time functions as a financial weapon and whether you have already lost your window to use it at full power. Here is what this video will do. It will run the actual numbers, not the sanitized version that gets used to sell index fund courses, not the cherry-picked version that assumes a 40-year runway and perfect market conditions. The version that includes the years where life happened, the job loss, the medical bill, the car that died in February, the 3 years where the contributions stopped because survival took priority. That version, because that is the version most people are actually living. By the end of this, you will know exactly what early investing actually buys you that money cannot replace. Why investing more later is not a recovery strategy. It's a completely different game with completely different odds. The specific number that determines whether you are still in a position to close the gap, and the one tactical move that changes the math more than either starting early or investing more later ever could on its own. Let's get into it. The middle class is taught one financial truth about investing above all others: save more. If you're behind, save more. If the market dropped, save more. If retirement feels impossible, save more. The entire recovery strategy handed to working people is volume-based. Throw more money at the problem. And that advice is not wrong. It's just catastrophically incomplete, because it ignores the only factor in investing that cannot be purchased at any price level, at any income level, at any point in your career: time. Not time in the motivational sense, not time in the market beats timing the market as a bumper sticker. Time as a mathematical multiplier that operates on a curve so steep that the difference between starting at 22 and starting at 32 is not 10 years of contributions. It's a gap that more money alone almost never closes. Almost. Here is where it gets precise. Claire is 22. She works a logistics coordinator job making $48,000 a year. After rent, utilities, student loan minimums, and groceries, she has roughly $400 a month she could invest. She does not invest all of it. She invests $250, some months $200. She's not optimized, she's not disciplined in the way financial gurus define discipline, but she starts. She opens a total market index fund and sets up an automatic transfer on the first of the month for $250. She doesn't think about it much, she doesn't track it obsessively, she just doesn't stop. Derek is 32. He makes $94,000 a year. He's been meaning to invest for a decade, and the decade passed the way decades do, full of reasons that each made complete sense at the time. At 32, something shifts. He gets serious. He opens the same type of account, reads 3 solid books on index investing, and commits $900 a month. No excuses, no lifestyle upgrades until retirement is funded. He is, by any reasonable measure, a more serious investor than Claire ever was. At 65, Claire's portfolio, built on $250 a month for 43 years with an average annual return of 9%, which is the long-run historical average of the U.S. total market including corrections, sits at approximately $1,740,000. Derek's portfolio, built on $900 a month for 33 years at the same 9% return, sits at approximately $1,820,000. Derek wins, barely.
By investing $650 more per month every month for 33 years, Derek ends up with roughly $80,000 more than Claire. He put in approximately $356,000 over his investing lifetime. Claire put in approximately $127,000. Derek put in $127,000 more than Claire and ended up with only $80,000 more in the account. Read that again. He put in $227,000 more. He got back $80,000 more. The other $147,000 of extra effort, gone. Not lost to bad investments, not lost to fees, lost to the only thing money cannot buy back, the decade he waited. That's the first number nobody shows you. The cost of a lost decade is not the contributions you missed. It's the compounding those contributions would have generated on everything that came after them. When you miss the first 10 years, you don't lose 10 years of growth. You lose the foundation that every subsequent year of growth was supposed to build on. The math doesn't catch up, it separates. But here's where this analysis has to be honest in both directions.
The scenario above assumes Claire never stopped, and that assumption is where most early investor analyses fall apart completely. At 27, Claire's company downsized. She was out of work for 4 months. Contributions stopped. At 31, a health issue cost her $6,800 out of pocket that she did not have, so she pulled $4,000 from her investment account to cover part of it. At 35, she moved cities for a relationship that did not work out, and between the move costs and the month of overlapping rent, contributions paused for 6 months. Real life, not failure, just life. When you model Claire's actual trajectory, not the idealized version, her portfolio at 65 lands closer to $1,310,000, not $1,740,000. Derek, who started later but started with more with fewer life disruptions because he was older and more financially stable when he began, ends up with his $1,820,000 largely intact. Now Derek wins by $510,000. And this is the uncomfortable truth that early investing advocates do not want to confront. The mathematical advantage of starting early is real, and it is massive. But it is fragile. It depends on consistency during the exact years of life when consistency is hardest. Your 20s are not a decade of financial stability for most people. They are a decade of income volatility, relationship transitions, geographic moves, health surprises, and the gradual, expensive process of building a life from scratch. The compounding advantage of starting early only fully materializes if you can hold through all of that without touching the account, without stopping contributions for longer than a few months, and without the kind of financial emergency that sends you backward instead of forward. Most people cannot, not because they are undisciplined, because they are human and their 20s are expensive in ways that have nothing to do with bad decisions. So what is the real answer? Neither camp is giving it to you. The early investing camp says start now, start small, time is everything. That is true and incomplete. The invest more camp says income is the variable, maximize contributions when you can afford to, discipline over timing. That is also true and also incomplete. Here's what both camps are missing, and this is the part of the conversation that almost never happens. The variable that determines whether you end up with $900,000 or $1,800,000 at retirement is not when you started. It is not how much you contributed. It is your continuity rate, the percentage of months across your investing lifetime where money actually went into the account versus the months where life intervened and it did not. A person who starts at 22 and maintains a 95% continuity rate, contributions going in 95% of months over 43 years, finishes ahead of almost anyone. A person who starts at 22 and maintains a 60% continuity rate because life kept happening, finishes behind a focused 32-year-old with a high income and an 85% continuity rate. The math that nobody runs is the continuity math. Not the how much math, not the how early math, the how consistently across how many decades math. And the reason that math never gets discussed publicly is that it forces the personal finance industry to give advice that is harder to package. Start early is a bumper sticker. Maintain a minimum contribution every single month regardless of how small, and never withdraw for non-emergencies for the next 4 decades is not. If you're watching this and you're in your 20s, the tactical move is not to maximize contributions. Not yet. The tactical move is to establish a contribution floor, the smallest amount you can sustain even in a bad month, and automate it so aggressively that stopping it requires active effort. $75 a month, $100, whatever number you could transfer even during a job search, even during a move, even during the month when everything goes wrong. Because the months where you keep going when everything says stop are worth more than 12 good months in a stable year. That's not a metaphor. Mathematically, the compounding those consistent months enable in your 20s and 30s is the engine that drives your 50s and 60s outcome. If this is giving you a framework for your money that the usual investing content has never handed you, hit the like button right now. It puts this in front of people who actually need it. And subscribe, because this channel exists to run the math that the financial industry packages out of the conversation. Every week, a new breakdown. Turn on notifications so you catch every one. Now let's talk about what happens when you're 35, 40, or 45, and you're looking at this math and feeling the specific dread of someone who sees the gap clearly for the first time. Because the answer is not what most financial content will tell you. The advice given to late starters is almost always volume-based. Maximize, contribute the maximum, max out the 401k, max out the IRA, catch-up contributions after 50. The message is, you're behind, so throw money at it. And there is truth there. Volume matters when time is compressed, but volume alone without a structural change in how your money moves produces mediocre late-stage results relative to the effort required. Here's what actually changes the math for a late starter.
The first is tax location, not just tax deferral. Most people think of retirement accounts as a way to delay taxes. The wealthy think of them as a way to engineer which income gets taxed and when. A 40-year-old with $900 a month to invest who puts all of it into a traditional 401k is deferring taxes. A 40-year-old who splits that same $900 between a Roth IRA and a taxable brokerage account is building 3 different tax treatments simultaneously: tax-deferred growth, tax-free growth on qualified withdrawals, and taxable accounts that can be harvested for losses in down years to offset gains in other years. The same $900, completely different wealth architecture. Over 25 years, the difference in after-tax wealth between a single-bucket strategy and a 3-bucket strategy can exceed $200,000 on identical contributions. That number never appears on the contribution limit brochure your HR department hands out. The second is sequence of returns risk, which almost nobody outside the institutional finance world talks about honestly. The order in which your portfolio experiences gains and losses matters as much as the average return. 2 investors can have identical average annual returns over 30 years and retire with portfolios that differ by 40% depending on whether the big losses came early or late in their investing timeline. A 40-year-old starting today has a shorter runway, which means a severe market correction in years 3 through 7 of their investing journey does disproportionate damage compared to the same correction hitting a 25-year-old. The 25-year-old has 30 additional years to recover. The 40-year-old has 20. The tactical implication is that a late starter cannot afford to be as aggressive in asset allocation as the early investor math suggests. The aggressive growth portfolio that works brilliantly over 40 years becomes a serious liability over 20 if the timing is wrong. Late starters need a glide path built into the strategy from day one, not a retirement date glide path, but a volatility glide path that gradually de-risks the portfolio over time regardless of what the calendar says. The third is income acceleration. This is the lever almost nobody wants to discuss because it requires admitting that investment strategy alone is not enough. For a person starting at 40 with $600 a month to invest, the math at 9% average returns gives them approximately $560,000 at 65. That is not retirement. That is a bridge. The only way to close the gap created by a lost decade or two is to change the income variable, which means either increasing earned income through career leverage, skill monetization, or promotion cycles, or introducing a secondary income stream that feeds directly and automatically into the investment account without passing through the lifestyle budget first. The moment additional income touches a lifestyle budget, the lifestyle expands to absorb it. That is not a character flaw. It is how human psychology responds to increased resource availability. The tactic is to route the increase before it becomes visible as spending power. A direct deposit split, a standing automatic transfer triggered on the same day as every paycheck, or a separate account that the additional income lands in and never leaves except to invest. Friction is the tool. Make investing automatic and make spending the active choice instead of the default. Here is the honest conclusion that this math leads to, and it is not the one either side of this debate wants to hand you. Starting early wins, but only if you protect the continuity of those early years with the same aggression that most people reserve for trying to invest more. The $75 a month when you are 24 and broke is not a consolation prize, it is a structural pillar. Remove it, and the whole architecture weakens in ways that $900 a month at 38 can only partially repair. Investing more wins, but only if the additional volume is paired with a multi-bucket tax strategy, a volatility-aware asset allocation that accounts for a compressed timeline, and an income structure that routes increases into the account before the lifestyle sees them. And the question that determines which game you are playing right now is not how much you are investing, it is how many months in the last 3 years did something actually go in. Because that number, your personal continuity rate, is the most honest predictor of where you end up that no financial calculator will ever ask you for. The market will do what the market does. The government will change the contribution limits. Inflation will move. Interest rates will shift. None of that is in your control. The one variable that is entirely yours is whether you keep going in the months when stopping feels justified, because it always feels justified. There is always a reason. The people who end up financially free are not the ones who had the best reasons to keep going. They're the ones who kept going anyway. Small, inconsistent, imperfect, and uninterrupted. That's the real math nobody shows you. And now you have it.